It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Been seeing a lot of articles recently about how grateful we should all be that we have an uber wealthy class of billionaires who live in the lap of luxury, and most of the time the hardest work they do is move money from one pocket to the other. But I'm seeing this we should just be grateful for our billionaires. We should be grateful for the gouging that they're doing. We should be thrilled with greed. Greed is good. And I was reading a Wall Street Journal article just before I came on air. And remember, the newspaper of the investor class, it was an opinion piece, oddly enough, written by, some folks over at the Stanford University Hoover Institute, one of our finer right-wing think tanks. And again, their opinion was we should be thankful that we pay high drug prices. We should be grateful because if Americans weren't overcharged, this was their tagline, if Americans weren't overcharged, we wouldn't have innovative treatments. We wouldn't have nice things. If they didn't get to gouge our eyes out, they wouldn't save our lives. That's the argument. And they go through how the rest of the world mooches off of us. They freeload off of our being gouged because they negotiate for prices. They negotiate for the drugs to be competitive in their market. Now, if you're a drug company and you're getting screwed by other companies in their negotiations, isn't that part of the free market? Isn't that part of the give or take? When did monopoly and when did gouging, when did that become free market capitalism? I know it's part of it. Look, I've got this thing that could save your life. How much are you willing to spend? How deep are you willing to dig into that pocket so that I can be richer? Now, the weird thing here is you see these arguments over and over and over again. The fact that we are, as they point out in this article, we're 4% of the world's population and account for more than half of the world's revenue on a new drug. So when a drug company comes out with their new drug, their latest, greatest, that could save your life, they make their profits off of your back and mine. And look, if you're fortunate enough to have good health insurance, like I am fortunate enough right now to have good health insurance, then you don't mind the gouging so much. But when you got to dig into your pocket and pay, $500, $1,000, $2,000 a month for drugs, just so that you can stay alive, there's something wrong with this picture. And what Joe Biden did and what the Democrats did, with no help, oddly enough, from our Republican friends on the prescription drug front, they said, look, there are some things we should be negotiating over. There are some things that should be much cheaper. You shouldn't be able to gouge Granny to the point to where she's back on the cat food. And I think as a society, we're kind of all there. But as they point out in this article, there's a cancer drug, Keytruda, I guess the name of it, evidently was Merck's #1 top-selling drug in 2022, generated what they said was sales revenue of almost $21 billion. 60% of that came from right here in the good old US of A, which, you get people going, you want to know why we're never going to find a cure for cancer? Almost $21 billion in revenue from one cancer drug. And you go, how is it that we give these drug companies so much? And I love some of the arguments that they made. Like drug companies would prefer that everyone pay high prices. Yes, every drug company would prefer that you pay double what it's worth so they can line their pockets. And this is one of those things that it's blowing my mind that they're arguing for, we should have obscene profits for these drug companies, because their argument is it's the only way that they're going to invest. It's the only way they're going to do the research and development to get new drugs. because they're greedy and they want more. Never mind the fact that a good majority of the research being done on the drug front is being done with the public money. Never mind the fact that public universities spend a lot of time, researching this stuff. Never mind that bit of reality. The argument is, hey, we need to pay for gouging because, if those people who want to import drugs from Canada, if they get their way, you're not going to have the drugs to save your life. If they get their way, we're going to all wish they didn't. You mark our words. And the thing that bothers me is what I know is drug companies spend more on advertising than they do on research and development. They spend more on saying, hey, is this right for you? Than they do on going, hey, maybe we could develop something that could cure cancer. But then we would put ourselves out of business. Because understand, first and foremost, the drug companies, about profit. I know we like to think, no, they're innovators. They're about, helping humanity. And look, there are probably some fire-breathing do-gooders in those companies who want to do those things. But at the end of the day, it's about the money. It's about the profit. It's about the coin that's in their pocket. And I love these stories that keep popping up that say, no, we need to have greedy corporations. No, we have to have billionaires. Without billionaires, there'd be no innovation. There'd be no entrepreneurship. And you go, we had entrepreneurs and innovators before we had an entire class of billionaires. We had people who wanted to transform industries and do things because, they made a little bit more money, but it also came with some stature. They created new technologies. Someone invented the wheel. It's mind-blowing to me. But we're fed this constant stream of, without billionaires, there'd be no job creation. They're the ones who build the industries. And they do, generally out of people's demand. Generally out of people wanting things and them servicing them. That's how the economy used to work. I had a rich uncle who used to say, look, we can give working people and poor people all the money. Eventually, we're going to get it back. Eventually, we're going to provide the services and the housing and all of the things that they need that they're going to have to come to us and buy from us because we create this stuff with their labor and we cheat them on their labor and then cheat them on the price of things. It's a win-win for us because that's the free market. But there was that period where we had some guardrails, couldn't gouge too much. And if you got too wealthy, we taxed it so that you had to use it in other ways. But hey, we're told, look, our billionaires, they're philanthropic. They do things for society. They invest in, things like healthcare and education, and they help alleviate poverty. And of course, research for drug companies. And you go, do they? Do they? I don't know. I'm not quite sure I'm buying all of that. And we're sold on this idea without them, we would just be standing around looking at each other. And without understanding that by having a bloated wealth class, what you end up with is mass income inequality. You end up with outweighed political influence for the handful, and really a concentration of economic power that a round table, a business round table, if you will, could collapse the economy if they wanted for their political benefit. And we don't talk about this stuff. We don't talk about any of this. We just argue and yell at each other. And the weird thing is we don't even get upset when we know they're cheating us. And that's the part that blows my mind. We know they're cheating us at every opportunity. And yet, we don't seem to get all that upset. And I look at Elizabeth Warren's tweet. She tweeted out the other day, fewer Doritos in a bag, fewer Oreos in your box, less toilet paper on your roll. You aren't imagining it. Big corporations really are making you pay the same amount, sometimes more, for less. She calls it shrinkflation. And she says we got to crack down on it. And I don't care what you call it greedflation, call it shrinkflation, doesn't matter. The rich are getting richer, and you and me and everyone else who punches a clock and works for a living, we're getting poorer. And that's where we have got to come back to, as I've said a million times, we have out-procreated them. They have all the money. Absolutely agree. They got all the money, but there are more of us. Maybe we should start voting for some good policies, some stuff that are actual reality instead of what we're fed. Maybe the actual facts. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Unions are making a comeback. More organizing in the last couple of years than in a long time. And the Biden administration being more supportive of unions than any president since FDR. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
We are AFGE. We support our nation's military and our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders and provide services to our nation's seniors across the country and here in Washington, D.C. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
So for the past, 3 years now, all we've heard from the MAGA crowd in the loudest, most uninformed way possible are the cries of, the recession is coming, the recession is coming. And yet, jobs report after jobs report, different reality. And here's the problem. Alternative facts versus actual facts. The difference between what MAGA wants, what MAGA believes, what MAGA continues to spew, and actual reality are very, very different. And good, fortunately, because nobody wants our economy to collapse, or nobody should, except a former president, and nobody should want the economy to struggle, because working people will struggle. You, me, us, we will be the ones who are struggling. So here to share some thoughts on the alternative facts versus, actual facts. I've asked our good friend Brendan Duke to come talk with us. Brendan is a senior director for economic policy there at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Brendan, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
So, I see this a lot. There's what MAGA world keeps telling themselves, this alternative world that they live in, where everything's terrible, the sky is falling, cities are burning, crime around every corner. It's horrible out there. And yet, I see all of this stuff that says, hey, we're heading in the right direction, man.
I mean, look, I think that description you're giving is where we were 4 years ago, right? When crime was surging, unemployment was super high, essentially when Donald Trump was president. But we've made enormous progress since those dark days of 2020, when we had a pandemic, when the bottom fell out of the economy. And I think last week was just the latest evidence of this, that we got a GDP report, which showed the economy grew more than 3% last year, blowing past all the other advanced economies, blowing past expectations. It also showed that inflation was back down to 2% over the last few months. And then we got this jobs report. And the context there is, all the folks on, the Wall Street economists, all the, people who predict these things, they were talking about, maybe the economy's slowing, maybe it's actually true and the recession thing is going to happen. And then the Bureau of Labor Statistics just knocked their pants off. It showed that we added 350,000 jobs in January, and they had to revise up how many jobs we added in November and December, that wages are growing much more quickly than inflation. And actually, this recovery from the COVID recession actually boasts the best inflation-adjusted wage growth. That is, wages, how much they're outpacing inflation. It boasts that the most of any recovery we've had since 1980.
Yeah. No, this is one of those things that I think is really important to point out, because every recession of my lifetime, workers have lost out. We've fallen backwards. Our standard of living has gone in the wrong direction. And this time, this time around, because of a lot of the policies that Biden and the Democrats, with a spattering of a Republican here or there, this is the first time in my working life where that's not going to be true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just, to go back to this, 4 years ago, we were in a recession, basically. The unemployment rate surged to 10%. And normally it takes a long time to get over that. The Great Recession took, almost a decade to get out of. And here we are just a couple years later, because of the American Rescue Plan, making that, strong investment in American workers and the economy, because of, frankly, getting vaccines and people, shots in people's arms, made a big deal. And those investments, the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, all these investments are just kind of pulling it along. So we just have gotten that boost up, and it's going to keep us going. And where we are now is I think it's just a lot of people are comparing us back to where we were in 2019. But the thing is, it's just not normal for us to actually bounce back within just a couple of years from a recession. And that's because of the leadership we've seen under President Biden.
And again, for me, it's one of these moments where you go, everything that we've been told for the last 40, 50 years about the economy has been wrong. This idea that, no, it's the invisible hand. Let the market decide. And you go, no, we can actually do some smart things. We can make sound policy, smart investments, and do some things to help move an economy in a way that benefits not only the 1% and the very wealthy, but, folks like you and me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just, it's the wages and inflation that I think matters most, because people care about prices and they care about their paychecks. And I think an important thing is about 6 in 10 workers are making more than they were a year ago, which is above where we were right before COVID. So, again, we've not just bounced back, we've bounced back better, so to speak, from where we were before the pandemic. And I don't think anybody expected us to be there.
So the question I have for you, Brendan, is
go ahead. Yeah,
is because we've been told, for the entire Biden presidency that Biden's a failure. We can't afford the spending, the investments that are being done. Everything's Biden's fault. How do you now spin this around that the economy is doing well? Even Larry Kudlow, Trump's former director of National Economic Council, even he's saying, look, costs are coming down, wages are going up, we're moving in the right direction. He said, look, we had a blowout jobs report. More Americans are working, and that's good no matter what your party registration is. And he even goes as far as to say not every economic stat should be viewed through a political lens, which is him trying to backpedal on all of the predictions he failed to make in the past, that the economy was all on slippery slope, everything was going to explode. We're actually in a good spot. And even someone like Kudlow is saying that. When does that trickle down to the average working person? Because you look at the polling out there, Brendan, it ain't good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been a big mystery for people, but I actually think it's pretty clear, which is it's really been the last 6 months or so that the economy has really taken off, that inflation has fallen, that wages have been growing. And, people, obviously journalists and the stock market, they pay attention to those things, every millisecond, right? But, I think everyday people, it takes them a while to feel things. And, it's just taking time for, I think, perception to catch up, that when we have folks like Larry Kudlow admitting that the economy is doing gangbusters, that we had Breitbart last week say strong GDP numbers once again humiliate forecasters. Those sorts of things, I think, are starting to resonate in people's minds. We've actually seen, the University of Michigan measures consumer confidence. We saw that shoot up, one of the fastest increases we've ever seen in January. And, I think an important thing to realize is that actually consumer confidence now is actually higher than where it was in January 2012, right before President Obama won his reelection. So I think all of these, all the economic data is going in the right direction. We're seeing consumer sentiment pick up. And I think, perception is going to catch up with those realities pretty soon.
So the other part of this then is, when do we stop listening to all these talking heads? Because they've been so repeatedly wrong, especially on this and on a lot of other things. But you turn on cable news, and depending on which hat you're wearing, you're getting a different version of reality. When do we stop? When do we say enough of that already?
Look, bad news sells. I mean, I like to joke, GDP blows past expectations. Let me explain to you why that's bad for Joe Biden. So that's just kind of how the news is. That kind of sells the doomsaying. And I think it's telling that, frankly, a lot of analysts, even Larry Kudlow, are struggling to, come up with the reason why this is bad. So, I think, this stuff is entertaining. People love stories of sharks eating people over the summer. And that's just kind of the news bias. But I think, again, as people feel this recovery, as they feel inflation recede, stuff will pick back up, and we'll start worrying about sharks eating people at the beach over the summer.
Oh, the good old days. Take me back. But here's the thing, and this is what bothers me. It's not just the economy. It's just not economic stuff. It's everything. Every time I talk to a red hat, a Trump supporter, the sky is falling in their world. Crime is on. In fact, I was talking to a guy recently who was telling me our cities are crime riddled, hellscapes that the people are being raped and mugged and beaten around every corner. And I'm like, how do you leave the house if all you're consuming is everything's on fire and everything is failing and society's collapsing and everyone's out to get you? I don't know how you wake up in the morning feeling like that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think social media and the media play a big role, but I think that could have been an accurate description of how a lot of people felt in 2020, but crime is down. That is the thing, is that we are just kind of getting back, we've gotten back in large part to that normal. And I think a lot of people's perceptions need to catch up with that crime, inflation, all of those, issues we had, exiting that pandemic economy, getting back to normal. Most of those things are past us. And I think people, just kind of need to realize that. And, I would just say, like, in terms of crime, again, it shot up under Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanted to cut federal funding for the police. You see what they're talking about with the FBI trying to defund it. I mean, I think, and, just even a more basic level, their top priority in Congress is cutting funding for the IRS, which is actually an important law enforcement agency. They actually busted Hamas a couple of years ago for financial crime. They arrest fentanyl dealers. They're they're one of our most important crime fighting tools because they follow the money. I mean, this is the untouchables, right? That's how they caught Al Capone. These guys caught Al Capone. And so, again, when you look at it, it's pretty clear that when things went out of control was under Donald Trump, and actually they have a policy agenda to bring things back out of control all over again.
And worse. You listen to, I was just reading a story of the top 10 things Trump wants to do as president, and it's all bad. We're going to go firing government workers. We're Schedule F, Project 2025. We're going to bring patronage back. It's going to be about revenge and retribution. Nothing about making people's lives better. In fact, when you've got a former president who comes out and says, I want the economy to collapse so that I'm not Herbert Hoover, man, I don't know how you vote for that. I just don't know. But here's the thing that gets me. The rest of the world is struggling and a lot more than we are. And I think there's a massive disconnect. Now, I understand, look, everything's individual. Everything's your own kitchen table. Your reality is what you see every day. But we've fared so much better than the vast majority of the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Wage growth has been faster. GDP growth has been faster. Inflation has been slower. A key thing is that Europe's obviously much more exposed to the supply chain disruptions that came from Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. And that at the same time, their economy hasn't bounced back nearly as much. Germany's in the middle of a recession. The U.S., Joe Biden took a lot of flack for making that aggressive investment, the American Rescue Plan, to get things back going again. And, frankly, kind of took it in the teeth for 2 years. And now, looking back, it seems like it was a prudent investment.
Yeah.
And, I think when you were talking about Donald Trump, and, hoping for, a depression, I mean, my reaction to that is, who does he think he is, a Democrat? Because it's always a Democrat who takes over right when the economy is collapsing and, just all of the bad things, apocalypse, the headlines, those sorts of things. That's when Democrats get elected. They clean stuff up.
Yeah.
That's generally that's been when we like Democrats the last 2 times.
I thought the best line that Hillary Clinton had in her 2008 campaign was, it takes a Clinton to clean up after a Bush, because of the Bush recession that Bill Clinton had to clean up after, and obviously the debacle and mess that W left the country in 2009. I thought that was an interesting line. But the fact of the matter is our economy is doing well. We are on the road to a solid improvement. Even so much so that I was looking on social media that you got Chinese investors looking at their stock market, basically begging the U.S. to bail them out because they're doing so poorly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges for the world economy is the struggle China has, that they have a big real estate bust, which is actually, I mean, hopefully in some ways we can benefit from that in the form of lower prices. But, I think that's a huge challenge for the world economy. But I mean, look, I'll tell you right now, if people worry about China, like at the end of the day, there are people from China who fly to Ecuador, travel through the jungle to come to the United States. I think that tells you everything you need to know about how great this country is doing, that you have people flying to the jungle and traversing hundreds of thousands of miles to reach our border because the economy is doing so well.
Well, maybe that is going to be the immigration policy Republicans come out with: destroy the economy so no one will want to come here, and it'll actually be the doomed, fire-burning hellscape that they believe it is, and that will be our immigration policy, since it seems they don't want to do anything else. But Brendan, I appreciate you taking some time. Good news. Thrilled to hear it, and I hope you'll come back and share some more with us down the road.
Thanks for having me on, Rick.
Our good friend Brendan Duke, Senior Director for Economic Policy there at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. I want to hear your thoughts. Is it burning in your neighborhood, or things turning around? Are things looking up? Are those factories being built? Those jobs being created we've been talking about? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. For our Free Speech TV audience, thanks so much for being here. For everybody else, quick break. Right back.